It's called Bi in Chinese, spelled P-I in the old 8 giants. Bi. Yes, I'm coming. This book is more dependable than machine. It's by Richard Wilhelm, whose translation of the I Ching about 6 million people wrote one. It's called A Short History of Chinese Civilization. And it's one of the best of all the short histories. Published in London in the English translation in 1929. On pages 72 and 73, he gives us a series of 6 symbols that established the Zhou dynasty. They are symbols that usually appear in jade. 2 of the symbols signify heaven and earth. The circular form with the hole in the center, the B, symbolizes heaven. And this container symbolizes earth, and its pronunciation, sum, these 2, heaven and earth, denote for us 2 points. And whenever we have 2 points, we have the possibility of a line. And since we have a line, one has to understand an axis joining heaven and earth. In China, the axis joining heaven and earth went to the pole star. And this axis generated a magnetic current, which in fact it does. To the Chinese Taoists, this magnetic current was an invisible energy which the spirit participated in. Now these symbols are patterns which the mind is able to see in structure. They're different from images. If I look at something, I can see its form. I can see its material. I can close my eyes, and I can more or less visualize the form. And even though it's changed form here, it keeps the initial form that I have seen in the mind. And so images tend to be on a plane. So images of this world establish a plane in the mind. Not only if I look at something can I make an image, but the power of the resolution of the mind on this plane is profound. You can resolve images that you would not think possible. I'll just give you one example. Some of you who've been listening to me for some time heard this before. When I was younger, instead of chasing girls, I, like Don Quixote, chased vigils and long fasts and things like that. I loved that when I was a young man. And one time, above Lake Tahoe, almost at the top of the peak that is Heavenly Valley in the wintertime, I was coming into little grove with some rather large rocks, and feeling very hot and dehydrated, I hefted my rucksack as I sat down on a big boulder, and out of the rucksack a little juice can tumbled, and it glinted in the sunlight once. And I caught the glint out of the corner of my eye, and it fell and rolled. But I was more concerned with the intensity of the attack of the penetration of the meditational problem at the time. And so immediately sat down and went into fairly deep samadhi. And in that, as soon as I calmed the mind, a little oval floated up in the plane of the mind. And it was silver gray, and as it changed from oval to circular, I could read in blue script sun-kissed. And I came out of that meditation, leaped over, grabbed that little juice can and looked at it, and sure enough, sun-kissed grapefruit juice. I had not seen the writing at all. It was subsumed in the glint of sunlight in a nanosecond out of the corner of the eye. But the powers of resolution in deeper meditation are such that one can bring back the image to any degree of distress, to any degree of exactness. One can not only read the traditional trademarked sun-kissed script out of a glint of sunshine, but you could go into the molecular structure of the can top, or whatever you need. The important thing is that those images and that resolution, those visualizations are not symbolic. They are not symbolic. It's the mind, in its response to nature, making it plain. And the sloppy way of talking about the mind in this way is to say the mind is a mirror. The mind mirrors the world. And if you left it at that, you could make some sort of a case that, yes, the mind is like a mirror, and it sees the world in extraordinary detail. But there are no symbols in nature whatsoever. And one has to dissolve the mirrored quality of the mind in order to see symbolically. One has to allow the plane to generate a spirituality, its plane geometry become a trigonometry, before symbols can work. So that the flat mind knows nothing about symbols, nothing whatsoever. One can speak token, rote language that you have learned through instruction, and sounds like you know what you're talking about. But anyone with a deeper mind can immediately see that they just have no experience whatsoever. None whatsoever. Most of the translations of the Tao Te Ching are on this plane, rather sophomoric level. Completely adequate for a mythic culture, or people who are not going anywhere in particular, certainly not leaving their own cultural sandbar. But for us, what's important is to understand that the Tao Te Ching is a symbolic view of the personality on a cosmic scale in operation in the full sphere of the real. And as such, it's not 2,500 years old. It is as contemporary as we are. It is right here with us. Instead of beginning with the Tao, we've begun with the Te. And we've tried to understand that somehow Te is a wholeness, an all. It has power, but not the kind of power of electromagnetism, or even the strong or weak forces of the atom. Its power is wholeness. Now, if I push a hand out with some kind of effort and directedness, I can exert some force. And if I speed it up, I can exert more force. And if I put it as fast as I can, a great deal of force. And if I gauge it for its impact exactly at the right nanosecond on a plane in this world, it can exert an enormous force. Te has nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that at all. So to understand it as power is actually meaningless, because it has nothing to do with power. It has everything to do with the kind of amperage that reality has when it's whole. When anything is whole, when it is exactly what it has Te. When an ant, and most ants are good at just being ants, they have Te. So that an old Aztec adage was for someone to have the will of the ant. Or a grizzly bear, if you want to be a yogi bear, that grizzly bear has no Te. But he prowls around and is stubborn and touchy and snuffles along and is protective of everything that it can smell. That's being a very good grizzly bear, has a lot of Te. What about us? How do we have Te? We can have or not have Te in any moment, in any mode, no matter what we're doing. So the whole purpose of the Tao Te Ching is to sensitize us to what is required of us for Te to operate in us. Now when Te is fulfilled in us, the Tao Te Ching would not say that we then have Te, but that we then have Zhen. As soon as one of the 5 phases of the 5-phase energy cycle is full, the next one's there. As soon as Tao is full, Te is there. As soon as Te is full, Zhen is there. When Zhen is full, Yi is there, and that's where the symbols are. So that no mind ever had symbolic vision and penetration without Zhen being full. So the Tao Te Ching says of that Zhen that it is spirit Zhen. Zi Zhen. Sometimes translated as self-sowness or as self-thusness. We're just going to use the term spirit Zhen. When spirit Zhen is full, immediately symbols are here. And the symbols that are in the mind are real to the extent that the things of the material world could never hope to be. So much so that the symbols in the mind can transform the world. And out of the fullness of the E of the symbols in the mind comes the 10,000 things. There never was such a thing as a book in nature. It came out of the symbolic mind. The book is a thing out of the symbolic mind. A cassette is not in nature. It's a thing out of the symbolic mind. So the world of the 10,000 things in Taoism mean that those things are all from the fullness of E, from the fullness of symbols, which meant that there was a fullness of Zhen before that, a fullness of Te before that, a fullness of Tao before that. And so these things, when they are just what they are, then Tao appears again. So that the whole notion of what is real to a Taoist is that all along this phase form transformational movement, that Tao can reoccur. And because it sometimes occurs in such a rapid way that the Tao becomes Te, becomes Zhen, becomes Yi, becomes Li, that this happens so quickly that time does not even elapse. The I Ching says that heaven suspends its symbols, and that the standard of Tao is the spontaneous. We're learning how to step back and look forward. Step back one step and look forward 2 steps. We're learning how to do this grandfather phasing, or grandmother phasing, if you would rather have it. And we're learning not to look for the cause of things, but to look for the correspondence of where we are. That when we step 1 step back and look 2 steps ahead, 2 steps behind us is a correspondence to us. And so this kind of tuning fork quality is what characterizes Taoism. In the discussion of Te, we saw that there were 4 chapters that formed a kind of a square in the discussion of Te. And there were as many chapters before that square as there were after that square. And those chapters we had last week, 58, 59, 60, and 61, were the square at the center of the discussion of Te. Or if you prefer, if you like fancier language, the numinous discursiveness of Te requires that there be a mystical presence of geometricity at the center of the trigonometric functioning matrix. Later on, this will become the square in the heart. That square inch in the heart where the inner person dwells. And in late degenerate Ming China, there were many wealthy recluses who tried to find that little tiny person, that thumb-sized person, as if there were literally something there and that it was not symbolic. And they did the same thing that the degenerate Sung had done, that the degenerate Tang had done, that the degenerate Han had done. They would see that gold was symbolical of immortality, and they would put little bits of gold in their food, in their drink. They would see that mercury was transformative metal, so they put little bits of mercury in their drinks and in their foods. And of course they would die of horrible nervous diseases that you get from mercury poisoning and auric poisoning and other kinds of metallic misuse. We can see that this is ridiculous, but in our time it's almost impossible for us to see that it is also just as ridiculous to make fetishes of the material world, even in their image parallels, and think that that's going to do anything for us. But somehow if we make the image of the Madonna really clear in our mind, she's going to really like us better. It's extraneous. The piety is lovable, but there's no effect. There's no effect at all. Whereas the correspondences, once they are set up in resonance, resonance has a way of generating a wave front, a wave form. And once you've begun a resonance, the resonance can be continued much easier. So that once you have established the primordial tuning fork correspondence, Gen Dao. Once Gen Dao has been established as a resonance, all the other resonant waveform patterns, of which there are many, 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 we're not even beginning to talk about them. Many, many, many. My resonance with Tao sets up a resonance with the 10,000 things. There are cycles in heaven and cycles on earth. There are bodily cycles. There are all kinds of cycles that one can modulate, and one can literally make a symphony of life. You can begin to conduct a symphony of life and live in such a complex consonance that one's elation exceeds that of even ecstasis in any kind of other form. But you have to begin right. And so, at this juncture in the discussion of Te, the next 4 chapters from the center square in the discussion of Te, the second part of the discussion of Te, is going to look at this more refined beginning point. But before talking about considering beginnings, which is chapter 63, one has to prepare for that, so one talks about doing Tao in chapter 62. So we're going to start with doing Tao, and then we're going to move to consider beginnings. And then we'll move on to 2 other chapters beyond that. But before that, we have to remember that at the end of the square, at the end of 58, 59, 60, 61, 61 was entitled Humility's Te. So that Humility's Te and Consider Beginnings have a correspondence. And Doing Tao will have a correspondence with the chapter just after Considering Beginnings. And chapter 64, which is the chapter after it, is entitled Mind the Insignificant. Not that mind, comma, the insignificant, but like they say in Canada, mind you, the insignificant is important. Mind the insignificant. Because in doing Tao, the insignificant is always where the beginnings are. Beginnings are never seen except by someone who is looking at the invisible, because beginnings happen before there's anything there, because the roots of some activity or of something are not in the cause, but in the grandfather correspondence. And so one has to look symbolically to see what the pattern of correspondences are, and you can pick out fertile possibilities without too much sophistication, without too much practice. You can begin to pick them out. And you can see that these are possible seeds, and if given any kind of nourishment, an event will happen that's exactly right. Because the event that happens that's exactly right carries the resonance with it. And if you participate in helping that event occur, which is just right, you get a tailwind with that resonance, and it helps you. And so the virtue in plants and animals, in herbs, and all these other things are not for physiological details, which you could analyze in some kind of lab. That's another issue. Their Te is in the correspondence, in the resonances that are set up. And so the wisdom is in learning to live in that It's quite different. It really is. And on that level, um, there are no translators of the Tao. There are none. None of the translations will be. So my attempt to at least be responsive to some of the good fortune I have had in my life to receive accurate teaching. Here is my translation of 62, Doing Down. Begins with characters. The very first character is the one that we have become familiar with. It's the character for Tao. So chapter 62, right after the square about Te, begins with the character for Tao. And the second character is the character for man. So right away, Lao Tzu is so accurate to the nth degree. The more that one refines oneself, the more you see that Lao Tzu is there before you. And you refine yourself until you're looking at the relationship of one or two characters out of 5,000, and they're exactly right. So it's like looking at the musical score of a Bach fugue, and you can see, well, there's not a single note out of place. What do you conclude? You conclude that he understood the fugue form. What do you conclude about Lao Tzu? That he understood the way life is real. And what can you say? One should then learn from such a person. How do we learn? We don't listen to someone like that, but we get into sync with them and do like they do. And learn to experience their correspondence to the point of consonance. Then we've got it. So chapter 2, Doing Down, begins, Tao Man. The 10,000 things, their sanctuary. Tao Man, the 10,000 things, their sanctuary. Good gen, their treasure. The not good gen itself's cleanliness. Beautiful language can thereby produce. Noble deeds can thereby accomplish gen. Gen. It's not good. Why dismiss its is? Therefore, elected heaven's son, appointed 3 governors. Through having revered the bee, thereby riding the 4 horses, chariot. In other words, there's more. Let's go back for a minute. Begins with Tao Man, and then makes an apposite phrase, the 10,000 things. A Tao person, if you like, the 10,000 things, their sanctuary is the Tao person. Why is it their sanctuary? In other translations, instead of giving sanctuary a boost here, they make it a kind of, they use the translation of the characters that make good Confucian business sense. Good administrative things, and they talk about not sanctuary so much, but here it's called reservoir in John C.H. Wu. Here it's just called the depth of all things. Here it's called the source of all things. Source, reservoir, depths, Master Ni doesn't say anything, just says Tao invisibly supports all things. Well, it isn't that Tao invisibly supports all things. That's not what Lao Tzu is saying. Master Ni tries. He translates it Tao invisibly supports all things. It is a treasure to virtuous people, yet it is a refuge for unvirtuous people too. This is gallant, but misleading. This kind of mentality misled a whole generation in the 1960s. The Tao is not ethically ambivalent at all. Not at all. It is the same, and Te is the same for both. But what is preserved for the not good gem is its clinginess. What's preserved for the good gem is the treasure. So it isn't just that it's an ambivalent refuge for all. Good words will find their market. Good words will find their market, and here it's translated, therefore at the enthronement of an emperor and the appointment of the three ministers, better still than those who present jewels, followed by horses, is the one who, sitting, presents and propounds the Tao. Well, Chu Ta Kao is being highly ethical, and his advice, probably on some second grade level, is very nice, but it has nothing to do with what Lao Tzu said. He does not say that. He does not say what Master Wu translates. He does not say what John C.H. Wu translates. We're not talking about marketplace here at all. This is not a Keynesian or neo-Keynesian type of flow. Tao is concealed in the depths of all things, translates Chang Chongyuan. The worthy value it, the unworthy are protected by it. Good words may be traded for honor. Good works may impress men. Even if a man is unworthy, Tao will never exclude him. This doesn't do it all. It doesn't catch it. What Lao Tzu says is this, using English instead of the Chinese. Tao man, the 10,000 things, their sanctuary. Why? Because there are of resonance. What's in between them? The symbols. The fourth phase. The 10,000 things are in the fifth phase. Gen is in the third phase. Good gem, their treasure. The not good, gem itself's clingingness. Beautiful language can thereby produce. Noble deeds can thereby accomplish gen. Gen, it's not good. Why dismiss its is? In other words, we're not trying to weed out one half of what occurs and say only that the good occurs. The bad also occurs. The not good also occurs. It must be seen to occur. It in fact occurs. It occurs just as the good occurs. When we bring them together in the spherical fullness, though they occur together on the plane, in the geometricity, they do not occur outside of the wholeness in the spirituality. So that when we see the world for what it is now, only then on that basis can we transform it in the mind from the polarity which is there in the world, reproduced as an image in the polarity of the plane in the mind, But when we transform the plane in the mind into the sphere of wholeness, the te that is generated then becomes Gen, and that Gen, when it is whole, is able to conceive of symbols that can go back and transform the world and emphasize the good, so that the not good Gen occurs less and less. Through a conscious, selective process, a conscious symbolical transformation, and a conscious application. Now this misunderstanding that somehow Taoism is sort of like a moonbeam philosophy is absolutely stupid. It's just like the Hermetic tradition. It understands that if you want to change something, you have to see it better. Before you can see it better, you have to see it as it is. And you have to understand how the as-is got there. How come bruised fruit keeps showing up in the market? And watch the shopkeeper. He's not bruising the fruit. We watch the delivery trucks. They're not bruising the fruit. We go to the orchard. The pickers are careless. They're bruising the fruit. You can't scream at the shopkeeper or the truck driver. It won't do any good. But if you talk to the pickers, then the fruit is no longer bruised when you take it home from the market. But what the Tao is to see things just as they are, but to understand that you can change anything. Anything. You can change single items. You can change whole complexes of items. You can redirect cycles. You can change the matrix of the all. You can change yourself. You can change the way in which heaven and earth relate. In other words, there is absolute, complete, 100% total freedom in Tao. You can do whatever you need to do, but you have to do it from wholeness. You can't push your way to victory. You have to resonate your way to thusness. So the not good Gen itself's cleanliness is there just like the good Gen's treasure is there. And because both of these, the good Gen's treasure and the not good Gen's cleanliness, because both are there, out of that plane where both occur exactly as they are, comes the acceptance into the fullness of Gen, which then allows for some symbols to come into the mind, which can then do things. But instead of saying all of this discursively, like I say, Lao Tzu only presents it in symbolical short form. He says the good Gen's treasure is there, the not good's cleanliness is there, but out of a wholeness, out of the sphere that is generated from transforming that plane into the wholeness, then beautiful language can thereby produce whatever you want it to produce. It can modulate the change, which is always going on, to do something else. Noble deeds can thereby accomplish change. So, notice how Lao Tzu then, without any further ado, slips back. His language is always disjunctive to a causal sense. He's not making a causality argument. He's presenting corresponding phrases, which we have to get the correspondence and the resonance, which requires of us to see symbolically in terms of structure. So once he's talked about how the good Gen's treasure and the not good gen's clinginess, when they occur together, can be transformed into wholeness. And out of that comes beautiful language and noble deeds, which have efficacy. But then Lao Tzu goes back and says, Gen, it's not good. Why dismiss its is? Why be in such a hurry just to cover up and throw away the not good gem? You don't have to throw it away. You can transform it. You can incorporate it in the change. You can have it participate in the transformation. And if the spiritual person brings himself into play, they're like the refining fire. They're like the crucible within which this transformation can be actually made. And so by taking into one's wholeness the not good gem of someone in a situation and transforming it in oneself, you can, through language and deeds, change them. And you don't have to do it through telling them or forcing them. That's not beautiful language or good deeds. But through the beautiful language evoking the symbols in their mind, by the noble deeds evoking the participation in their person, in their lives, they begin to participate in the right resonance. And in doing so, they enter into the correspondence. Therefore, elected heaven's son, the spiritual person is the elected heaven's son, appointed to 3 governors, heaven, earth, and man. And Lao Tzu goes on in this kind of effusiveness, because most of the readers of this would be people who would be at court, and their favorite image for success in this world would be the fanfare of having revered the symbol of heaven in the right way so that you got the right position and you have a fine chariot at your disposal with 4 beautiful horses and all the attendant houses and physicians and servants and money and clothes and the whole shebang. So he conflates all that into the symbol. All right, you revered the pea and now you're riding the 4 horses. Yet not equal to the tranquility of testifying with this doubt. The elation of worldly success at the top of the social ladder, the court pecking order, doesn't hold a candle to the gorgeous elegance of being able to testify to Tao accurately by living. Not equaled by tranquilly testifying this Tao. The ancients, their reason for esteeming this Tao was what, indeed? That they did it, that's what. Why did they esteem the Tao? Because they did it. What indeed? The next 2 Chinese characters mean not say. It's telling us, don't talk with these kinds of nice little phrases in your mouth. Not say, sought, then secured. Who sin thereby saved. Don't use those kinds of phrases. Sought, and therefore you got security. You were saved from your sin. Don't say that, because those are not causally effective at all. Nothing in this world is causally real. Nothing. And then there's a Chinese character, which I always translate as A, like the French Canadian A. You usually get a nudge with it. A, like, do you get it? Don't use those cute little phrases of anti-Ibsen social propriety. That's not it. Not say, sought then secured. Who sin thereby saved. Eh? Therefore doing heaven, earth, honor. Therefore doing heaven, earth, honor. D.T. Suzuki translates the two characters as the worlds, but actually, Tian Sha, it means heaven, earth brought together in this wholeness of the Te. So I always translate it as heaven hyphen earth, heaven, earth. When one lives in consonance with the Tao, so that one's gem is full, one's symbols in one's mind are then fertile and able to see the patterns and what is fruitful to bring into play, and long before it's really needed, already it's been brought into play. We're going to take a little break here and come back and move on to the next three. One of the easiest ways to teach children about wholeness, about the way in which complementarity is superior to polarity, is to use your hands. You tell a child that if the left and the right hand are polar to each other in a polarity, you can get effects, sounds. But if you make the hands into a complementarity and you use them together, you can make something much more powerful than just a hand clap. You can bring energy into a spiritual play and gift it. And if you do, whatever is in its correspondent natural grandfather-facing place, not a position in terms of materiality, but a place in terms of consonance, all of that will vibrate together. There'll be a ripple of energy through everything that's in tune. And that's how you can tell what's in tune, who's in tune. Usually when you go into nature in its primordial mode, everything's in tune. There are not many places now that are like that. But 30 or 40 years ago, one could still find great sections of California that were still in tune. If you'd gone on the John Muir Trail 35 years ago, the whole spine of the High Sierras was in tune. The Sierra Nevada was just like a symphony. And it's one way of confirming for oneself that you're in tune, because you resonate with the wholeness, with the Tao that's there in nature. But for people who are still clapping their hands, listening for the hand claps as an index of their importance, they're still missing Bagza, because he's like the primordial wilderness. His language comes alive, comes resonantly into play when we bring our spirit gem to him. Then his language sets up all of these ripples, and we can see this is how it is. Well, chapter 63, which is typical of Lao-Tzu's demonstrative accuracy, he's saying, here are beginnings, let's consider them. Consider beginning. And he'll give us 3 phrases, very pithy phrases, setting up a resonance, a wave form. And in this wave form, he will then give us a pair of seeming polarities that are brought into complementarity by having the pair of pairs brought to a square. The two polarities in the first pair are great and small. The two polarities in the second pair are many and few. You could even reduce it further. Lao Tzu just says many and few. You could make it radical and say many and one. The one and the many. The small and the great. But these two, which are polarities in a kind of slovenly, worldly way, when made into a balanced, a polarity which is faced with another polarity into a balanced square, then the complementation of the first pair and the complementation of the second pair resonate together. So if you use a pair of pairs, when you transform a polarity into a complementarity, you set up a high energy waveform resonance. If you just bring one pair of polarities into complementation, it's beautiful, but it has only so much oomph. But if you do an exponential thing of bringing a pair together like that, the amperage is quite amazing. It's like atomic fusion. You don't need to do a whole lot. But if you do just more than one case, you expand it. So in chapter 63, consider beginnings. The first word, the first character is Wei. The second character is Wu. And the third character is Wei. Wei, Wu, Wei. Shi, Wu, Shi. Wei, Wu, Wei. Ta, Xiao, To, Xiao. What do you say? It went so fast, because one of the Hermetic treatises says, the teaching was so accurate, neither of us heard it. Neither the teacher nor the student heard it. So what the teacher and the student have to do then is get structurally wise. They have to bring themselves, instead of into a polarity, teacher-student, bring themselves into a complementarity, inquiring together, companionability. Then instead of the language going really fast by them, the language circulates in their fullness. And you have infinite time to hear exactly what it is. Even though in clock time it was spontaneous. In terms of spiritual time, you had all the time that there was. You learned everything there was about it. Now if you just make a translation in a form of a transliteration, the first three characters transliterate as do the not doing. Do the not doing. Now instead of translating Wu Wei as not doing, which led to some fascinating conversations in espresso coffee shops in the 1950s, I've translated as not busy. It isn't not doing. It isn't do nothing. That's not it at all. And if you think it's doing nothing, then by continuing to do anything, you've entered into paradox. And by entering into paradox, you seek safety in some subtle kind of analogy, which introduces subconsciously polarity again, and you're back into some kind of medieval Aristotelian bad habit. You get a scholastic itch to try and figure out what they really are trying to say. So So I translated as not busy. So the first three characters translate from me, do not busy. Not hyphen busy. Do the not busy. Don't get caught up in being busy. You don't need to be caught up in being busy. They used to have a wonderful television ad when television was first new. They had a Jell-O ad where this little Lulu cartoon character went around with her hands behind her back with a cloud of little spirals over her, and she would say, busy day, busy day, busy, busy, busy. No time for anything. And someone would come in and say, but there's always time for Jell-O. Very Taoist. Well, there's always time for Jell-O. And so, if one gets into not being co-opted by the resonance of busyness, one can instantaneously step out of that complication. You're still in it, but you're not caught up in it. And as soon as you do that, you stop getting the sound of hands clapping and you get the sound of one hand clapping. As soon as you do that, it slows radically. 1 second on the clock is like you have enough time to stage a whole ballet. It's like in martial arts where someone could you could put in 500 moves, not just one fast move. There's no contest. Do not busy. Act not action. Taste not taste. Great, small, many, few. Gift hatred itself to take. Contemplate the difficult while itself's change. Do great while itself's slender. Heaven, earth's difficult productions surely arise from change. Heaven, earth's great productions surely arise from the slender. Therefore, spirit gem to the end, not do the great, thus can finish itself's greatness. Now, rash promises certainly lack trust, many difficulties. Therefore, spirit gem holds difficulty itself, therefore to the end, no difficulty. Now you can see that Lao Tzu has this beautiful choreography of language phrases. He juxtaposes them so that they're consonant. He makes correspondences, he makes resonances, but he does this in such a structured way that each chapter, each section, has its own pattern like a snowflake. So that Consider Beginnings has this quality. Now if you come to Chapter 63. Ching Yuan. Action or non-action, work or non-work, knowledge or non-knowledge, large or small, more or less, is just like returning hatred with love, contemplating the difficult with the easy, working on the great through the small, because the hard tasks in the world must be preceded by what is easy. Great affairs in the world must begin with what is minute. Hence, the wise never works on what is great, he achieves what is great. The easier it is to promise a thing, the less one can fulfill. The more lightly things are taken, the more difficulties occur. Therefore, the wise takes things as difficult. He is always free from the difficult. That's what it says. John Woo translates it in a different way. Do the non-ado. It's sort of like a 1930s dance, right? Strive for the effortless, savor the saviorless, exalt the low, multiply the few, requite injury with kindness, nip troubles in the bud, sow the great in the small. Difficult things of the world can only be tackled when they are easy. Big things of the world can only be achieved by attending to their small beginnings. Thus the sage never has to grapple with big things, yet he alone is capable of achieving them. He who promises lightly must be lacking in faith. He who thinks everything easy will end by finding everything difficult. Therefore the sage who regards everything as difficult meets with no difficulties in the end. Master Ni's translation. Do that which is not done by doing. Make that which is not made by making. Taste that which cannot be distinguished by taste. Hold the same regard for the few and the many. Requite the unkind with kindness. Thus one of absolute virtue desires what is not connected with desire, sets no value on the rare goods of the world, learns what is not learned through learning, and induces the people to return to that which they have overlooked. Well, you can see. One can go through the 60 or 70 translations of the Tao Te Ching in English, and through the 20 or 5 or 30 that are in French, and through the 40 or so in German, and on, and none of them talk Lao Tzu. None of them would get the nudge from the old guy. Eh? Do, not busy. Act, not action. Taste, not taste. Great, small, many, few. Gift hatred itself to Te. Contemplate the difficult while itself's change. Do great while itself's slender. Heaven, earth's difficult productions surely arise from change. Heaven, earth's great productions surely arise from the slender. Therefore, spirit gem, to the end, not do the great, thus can finish itself's greatness. Now, rash promises certainly lack trust, many difficulties. Therefore, spirit gem holds difficulty itself. Therefore, to the end, no difficulty. And you can see that my translation is just markedly different. It's not only a different translation, it's on a different order. It's speaking Lao Tzu's style of language in a syntax which is spherical, which has consonants as its constant familiarity. Chapter 64, Mind the Insignificant. Itself at rest, change is quiet. Itself not yet appeared, change is prevented. Itself feeble, change is erratic. Itself skimpy, change is scattered. Do them while not yet exist. Govern them while not yet disordered. Both these arms embrace it. A tree emerges from a tiny root. A pagoda rises from stacking bricks. A 10,000-mile journey begins with a single step. Busying the one mars it. Seizing the one loses it. Spirit gem, not busy, therefore not mars. Not seizes, therefore not loses. People, they're pushing production, always at the approach of finish, but fail it. Always. Therefore, spirit gem desires non-desire. Non-esteems a difficulty. Te, its treasures he learns, not learnedness. he returns to Gen itself. What passes thereby assists the 10,000 things as their Gen itself, but not daring busyness. So I'm speaking Lao Tzu. I'm speaking pure Tao in English. And English is a marvelous language. 600 years ago, Chaucer transformed the English language into a humane vehicle. Chaucer wrote about a fair field full of folk. He wrote about human character as the only reality that there is. And that if you follow human character, you get the gist of what life is all about. And a couple hundred years after him, Shakespeare further transformed the English language, made it capable of using a kind of choreographed syntax that almost rivals Lao Tzu. And for the last 400 years, the English language has been expanded by the metaphysicals, by the Enlightenment, by the Romantics, by James Joyce and W.B. Yeats and T.S. Eliot and Wallace Stevens, until the English language is now ready to speak Tao. So chapter 65, Simplicity Te, is 1992 English language with Chaucer, Shakespeare, Milton, Shelley, Yeats, Joyce as companions. In ancient times, well done Tao, one did not thereby enlighten the people, it will thereby be plain to them. The people. They're difficult governing because itself's clever. Too much cleverness governing a country, it's that country's curse. Not with cleverness to govern a country, it's that country's blessing. Who knows these, both of them? Also a patterned mode. Always know the patterned mode. This is called profound te. Profound te. Deep indeed. Resonant indeed. Commonness reversed indeed. Thus obtained with great follow-up. So that's speaking down Lao Tzu's way, but using English as the language. It's very close to the Chinese, and if you could read the Chinese, you would see that it goes along this way. One thing to point out before we go. Don't look for a causal connectedness in the Tao Te Ching. Don't look for 61 to be followed by 62. School yourself to look, hold 62 aside, and put 61 and 63 together. Humility's te, consider beginnings. Then put 62 and 64 together. Doing Tao, mind the insignificant. And when you do that, then start the wave form. If you do 65, simplicity te, 63, consider beginnings, 61, humility's te, 59, keeping Tao, 57, simplify custom, 57, simplify custom, 55, sealing the mysterious. So 55, sealing the mysterious, 57, simplify custom, 59, keeping down, 61, humility's te, 63, consider beginning, 65, simplicity te. In other words, there's a wave form. It's like an energy of meaning that runs through the Tao Te Ching. And once you pick it up, then you've got it. They always used to iconographically symbolized Milarepa because he would have a hand behind one ear, and it was cocked, head was cocked just a little bit, and it was a smile. And when he was young and still unbelievably vivacious in terms of spiritual energy, with the gold earrings and the frizzled hair down, and he would hold the hand like that in his ashram on the slopes of Mount Everest. It's an ancient Mahayana Bodhisattva way of saying that if you can hear it all now, then whatever language you speak from that fullness will find its way to those who are ready to hear it. You don't have to worry about your call. You just sing out. Because when you sing out, those who are in tune will sing with you. That's the heavenly choir. More